Imagine waking up, making your morning coffee, and realizing your rent just doubled.
Yeah, just out of nowhere.
Right. And then by the time you get home from work and go to sleep, it's going to double again.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, like the exact same thing happens.
It sounds completely impossible, but
But it actually happened. In post-World War II Hungary, prices were doubling roughly every 15 hours.
yeah, it is a complete collapse of reality. I mean, financial machinery doesn't just stall in that scenario, it completely evaporates.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Because, we usually think of a nation's economy as this rational, well-maintained engine.
Right.
Where you put fuel in like capital, labor, resources, and you get a predictable output. The gears turn, the temperature stays relatively stable.
Exactly, yeah, under normal conditions.
Right. But introduce the ultimate shock to this system, like a global conflict, and suddenly that engine is catching fire. The gears are literally melting. All the standard operating manuals are they're thrown completely out the window.
Which is exactly why we are exploring the extreme mechanics of war economies today. We are going to look really closely at the forces of wartime inflation, hyperinflation, and the massive government interventions designed to stop them.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, everyone. We are so glad you are here with us. Today we're digging into a really fascinating article from quirkyjournals.com. It's titled War Economy, Chapter 17, Inflation, Hyperinflation, and Wartime Price Controls. And our mission today isn't just to give you, like, a dry history lesson.
No, definitely not.
We want to uncover the fundamental mechanics of how extreme crises stress test economies. Like, why do prices go completely haywire during global conflicts? And how do governments scramble to fix it, which, spoiler alert, often makes things way weirder.
Way weirder, yeah. But understanding these extreme wartime examples from the source, it's really the ultimate cheat code for understanding the inflationary pressures we see in our own modern economy today.
Totally. We're promising you a shortcut to being well-informed today. We're going to get into a country where, as we said, prices doubled every 15 hours. We'll look at hidden black market economies. It's going to be a ride.
It really is. And, to understand how governments try to control wartime prices, we first have to understand why prices explode in the first place.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the article lays out these two massive engines of inflation.
Right. Demand pull and cost push.
Yeah. So for the demand pull side, I was trying to think of a good way to picture this. It's like the entire country just won a massive cash lottery, but they're only allowed to spend it at a single convenience store.
I like that analogy.
And to make it worse, half the shelves in that store are completely empty because the factory that usually makes the candy is now making tanks.
That captures the dynamic perfectly, honestly, because the underlying mechanics are driven by the sudden, desperate shift in national priorities. When a government mobilizes for war, they have to fund enormous, unprecedented expenditures almost overnight.
Right. They need ships, uniforms, weapons.
Millions of them, yeah.
Yeah.
And the logistics to move it all. Tax revenues are almost never enough to cover that kind of immediate bill. So they fund the conflicts via deficit spending and money printing.
Boosting the demand side.
Exactly. They inject a tidal wave of cash into the domestic economy, mostly through wages for soldiers and factory workers doing endless overtime. Suddenly, the public is flush with cash.
But the supply side is basically being crushed at the same time.
Right. Workers leave factories for the front lines, and supply chains shift entirely to weapons.
So you have all this money chasing, like, almost no goods. I think the article noted that during World War I, U.S. prices rose by over 80% between 1917 and 1920.
Which is a staggering destruction of purchasing power, and that is just the demand side. You also have the second engine, which is cost-push inflation.
And that's more about the physical destruction.
Right. Yes. Destroyed farmland, blocked global trade routes, ships being sunk. The raw materials simply cannot get to where they need to go. And the few that do arrive are exponentially more expensive. And then you introduce the psychological feedback loop.
Oh, the consumer hoarding.
Precisely. People panic, they anticipate shortages, so they rush out and buy everything they can.
Which just empties the shelves faster.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling cycle.
Wait, hold on, though. If governments historically know that printing money and running massive deficits causes massive inflation, like, we have centuries of data on this, why do they keep doing it every time a conflict starts?
Well, it comes down to what the text highlights as the central bank dilemma. Raising taxes enough to fund a massive war is politically painful. It drains public morale right when the government needs maximum support.
So they just take the easy way out.
Basically, yes. They choose the short-term easy route of printing money or forcing central banks to buy government debt, like the U.S. did with yield curve control during World War II. They cap borrowing costs artificially, sacrificing long-term stability for immediate survival.
Just to keep the war machine running.
Yeah.
Okay, so if normal wartime inflation is an engine overheating, what happens when that engine literally catches on fire and melts?
That would be hyperinflation.
Right. We move from the basic stuff to the extremes when money breaks completely. Everyone always brings up Weimar Germany after World War I, right? Where people needed wheelbarrows of cash just to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah, that's the classic textbook example.
But the source had an even more shocking statistic. Post-World War II Hungary, you mentioned it earlier, but
Yes, the analysis of Hungary in 1945 and 1946 it remains the most extreme hyperinflation ever recorded. As we said, prices doubled roughly every 15 hours.
I just imagine going to sleep, and by the time you wake up and make your morning coffee, your rent has doubled. It'll double again before you go to bed. Once a country hits this point, how do they even function? Do people just stop using money?
They absolutely do. It happens because there's a complete destruction of productive capacity. Hungary was leveled. And combined with a government that has literally no other tool left but to print money.
It just leads to a total collapse of public trust.
Exactly. The citizens absolutely abandon the currency. They revert to barter systems, trading eggs or shoes, or they use foreign currencies on the black market. And that lasts until a credible monetary reform or an external bailout finally happens.
Wow. So knowing how destructive that unchecked inflation can be, governments don't just sit back, they try to outlaw
They
it.
do try it, yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This leads directly into the massive government interventions of World War II. In the U.S., they created the Office of Price Administration, the OPA.
Yeah.
The government essentially abandoned market pricing entirely. They just decided what everything should cost. Sugar, tires, meat. They put a legal ceiling on the price tag.
But you can't just cap prices without creating a massive shortage. So the OPA resulted in a two-currency system.
Two currencies.
Yeah, you didn't just need cash to buy groceries. You needed government-issued ration stamps.
Oh, right.
It required a massive bureaucracy to enforce. They had to use neighborhood volunteer boards to police people. And naturally, it created rampant black markets.
Because people will always try to get around the rules.
Always. And the UK had even more extreme rationing. It astonishingly lasted until 1954, which is 9 years after the war ended.
9 years of rationing in peacetime. That is crazy.
Yeah.
But I want to push back on the purely negative view of price controls for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was that part in the text citing research by Harvey Levenstein.
Oh, yes, about meat consumption.
Right. Didn't rationing actually help the poorest Americans? I saw that meat consumption for the poorest third actually rose by 17% during the war years.
It's a fascinating nuance, for sure. Price controls did somewhat redistribute access to food. If the rich can't buy unlimited steaks, there's more for the lower-income families.
Yeah, so it worked for them.
Well, it's a bit complicated because it's very difficult to separate that specific rationing effect from the broader economic reality, which was that war work created full employment.
Oh, so they just had more money in general.
Exactly. For the first time since the Depression, lower-end incomes were rising generally because everyone had a job.
Yeah.
So they could afford to eat better, regardless of the price caps.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if prices are legally forbidden from rising, but the actual costs of production keep going up because of the war, businesses have to find a loophole,
They always find a loophole.
which leads to the phenomenon of skimflation. It's like squeezing a water balloon. You stop it from expanding in one direction with a price cap, so it just bulges out dangerously somewhere else.
That's a great way to picture it, the hidden squeeze. And during World War II, sellers cheated the official price caps in all sorts of ways.
Like what?
Well, bakeries would sell lighter bread. The price stayed the same, but you got less bread. They adulterated meat with lower quality ingredients. Clothing was made with thinner fabrics, and canned goods were suddenly filled with way more water than actual food.
So the government was basically cooking the books on inflation, like pointing to a stable price tag while people were eating watery soup.
Officially, yes. The data from Milton Friedman and Anna Schwartz in the text covers this beautifully. Officially, the U.S. reported that WWII inflation was only around 5% per year, which is about 15.6% total.
Which sounds like a huge success.
Right. But when Friedman and Schwartz adjusted for that terrible quality drop to skimflation and factored in the black market prices people were forced to pay, the true inflation was actually around 27%.
Wow. That is a massive difference.
It is, and it directly connects to modern shrinkflation, where you buy a box of cereal for the same price, but it has fewer ounces in it. The underlying economic logic hasn't changed at all.
But you can only squeeze that water balloon for so long before it pops. What happens when the war ends and the price controls are finally lifted?
The dam breaks.
Yeah, the text highlighted the explosive aftermath in the U.S. When the OPA controls were finally lifted in 1946, and this was against the advice of 54 economists, by the way, inflation just exploded,
It shot up to over 20% in 1947.
which was the highest rate in 80 years.
Because the controls didn't cure the inflation, they just delayed it. And we see this historical lesson echoing in modern economic wars, too. Look at the 1970s oil shocks.
The Arab oil embargo and the Iranian Revolution.
Exactly. Those events quadrupled oil prices globally. It acted just like a war economy. And fixing it required the brutal Volcker shock, where the Federal Reserve had to push interest rates to nearly 20% to crush demand.
Ouch.
Yeah. And then you can draw a direct line from that right to the post-pandemic world and the 2022 Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Because of the disruptions to wheat, fertilizer, and European gas.
Precisely. It perfectly mirrored a classic war economy supply shock.
Wait, so if we look back at 2021 and 2022, politicians were actively pushing for price caps on energy and essential goods again. Did we learn absolutely nothing from 1947?
Well, the source does balance the debate on this. It's true that free market advocates argue that controls always fail, pointing to 1947.
Right.
But some modern economists argue that short-term caps can work, but only if the inflation is purely a temporary supply bottleneck, and this is the key part, if you have a clear, credible exit strategy.
Which politicians are famously bad at having.
Exactly. The danger is that controls delay the pain rather than curing it, and lifting them later just causes a bigger explosion.
So what does this all mean for you? If you're listening to this, you should really treat this as a historical cheat sheet for navigating future crises. Because conflicts and supply shocks seem inevitable.
Very inevitable, and the actionable takeaways from the source are pretty clear. First, holding cash and nominal bonds are the absolute worst things to do during wartime inflation.
Because the purchasing power just evaporates.
Yes. Second, real assets like gold, real estate, and commodities historically hold their value because they rise with general price levels.
Okay, what about the stock market?
Well, third, equities require careful picking. Defense, energy, and commodity extractors tend to win. But consumer discretionary companies,
Like luxury goods.
yeah, those lose heavily because people only have money for essentials.
Right.
And fourth, diversification across foreign currencies can literally save you if your own country's economy starts to buckle.
It really seems like inflation is the ultimate invisible tax. Does it basically just steal from the middle class to bail out the government's war debt?
Mechanically, yes, it does. Inflation erodes the real value of debt. So the government gets to pay back its massive loans with currency that is now worth a fraction of its original value.
Which massively benefits the government.
But it wipes out the savings of middle-class bondholders. And historically, this exact dynamic led to catastrophic political instability. Think of Weimar Germany again. The middle class was destroyed, proving that managing inflation isn't just about economics.
It's about holding society together.
Exactly.
Man, we've gone on quite a journey today. From the demand pull engines of World War I to the terrifying 15-hour price doubling in Hungary.
And the massive OPO rationing bureaucracy in World War II.
Right, all the way to the modern echoes in the Russia-Ukraine conflict.
Right.
We really want to thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Understanding these historical extremes makes the modern financial news infinitely easier to decode.
It really does.
But before we go, we want to leave you with a brand new, kind of lingering question to ponder on your own.
Oh, this is a good one.
So during World War II, the government relied on physical ration books and volunteer neighborhood boards to enforce price controls. And because it was physical, it created massive physical black markets.
People trading in the shadows.
Right. But as we move toward a world of fully digital transactions and central bank digital currencies, if a major war broke out tomorrow, could a government enforce absolute, inescapable rationing, which is the slip of a switch in an algorithm?
And if they can.
Yeah, what happens to the black market then? Think about it. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.